Hey guys, Butts and Coconuts here with episode 2 of Brunch Before Weiss Schwarz. Today, myself and my co-host, Tim Tom the Bim Bomb, we are going to talk about Rewrite, our expectations with Rewrite Anime, and how Rewrite Anime ended up shaping the deck and like how it affected the meta.
Yeah. Hello. It's a set with a lot of history, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
Rewrite for newer players. It's a pretty old set by this point. I don't remember exactly when the first couple sets came out, but at the latest, like 2012. And
mhm.
there was a point in the game when Rewrite was definitely one of the strongest decks out there. So strong, in fact, that it got hit with choose one of three that uh, only slowed it down. Even after that list, it was still a pretty good competitor for a while.
I think you probably call it tier zero. Like that at one point I was told that the only counter to rewrite back then was rewrite that ran four
That ran
wins.
wins. Yeah. Yeah. So
So
So yeah, this set had a lot to live up to in its legacy, I guess.
yeah,
And
because it's been a long time since it's been that good.
yeah, so
Yeah.
let's get started with some cards that stood out to both of us as the set was being spoiled, I guess.
Mhm.
So as a precursor, I guess, rewrite. There's three sort of clearly defined decks, I would say. And that was even more so pushed with Rewrite Anime, which is pretty common for how Bushiro chooses to design sets now. So now the cards are generally categorized into Triple K, which is Kotaro, Kagari, and Kotori cards.
Mhm.
Gaia, which is Chihaya and Akane cards. Gaia was also more or less the skeleton of the old rewrite deck.
Mhm.
And then finally Guardian, which is Shizuru and Lucia cards. So to start off, the
It's like we're in a time loop.
yeah,
I
so
think this was like we're talking about Persona 5, but this came very soon. Oh, it wasn't that soon,
it was
but
about a
like,
month, I think.
yeah, but everyone saw this like, whoa,
Yeah.
hey there.
So the first cards that stood out, a lot of people were interested in the Triple K engine. The core part of the deck was this bond, this like bond package. So this 1-0 event, it's called Fikoff Hiko. Basically, it's coffee backwards or whatever. It's an Azusa event for the Triple K characters. The Kotaro and the Kagari that go with it. The Kotaro is a 1045 that gains 1k on your turn and can ditch bond for the coffee event. And the Kagari, it gains one soul when you play an event, and she can pay bond for the Kotaro. So this virtually gives you 12 Azusas or like 12 mil fours in the deck.
And one of
And
them pluses you.
yeah, the Kagari being a plussing version of that. And it's not to say like literally that if you have all of these, you'll like mill 4 12 times, but that it's
Hmm.
just how many more times you have access to the card. And that was a very attractive thing. Looking forward during the spoilers, because of course Persona had just come out recently. I don't remember the total timeline, but a lot of people were very up on Persona because it also had a ditch bond to its 1-0 mill event and that sort of thing, be it an Azusa or a mill 4 event with a bond. That has always been like very desirable because mill is very good in this game.
Yeah, and it's also just a hand. It's this was everything. Stock bond into a hand filter into the mill four. Like,
Yeah. And it was kind of envisioned that this deck you would never really have deck problems because if you were ever with an unfavorable deck, you had enough copies of these cards to
yeah.
like burn through your deck at any moment, and that was very attractive to some people. Uh,
Hmm.
Another key component of the triple K cards is this early play Kotori. It's an early play if you have two or less climaxes in waiting room. It's a healer, and then it has a climax combo to gain a marker from your waiting room. You choose a blue character or a blue card, maybe even, I'm not sure, and
It's a
put
blue character, I think.
okay,
Yeah.
blue character we'll say, and put under her as a marker. And then during your opponent's battle phase before they attack, you can discard the marker from her to give her plus 2k power and to give the character opposite her -2 soul.
And it's a combo with the pants.
Yeah, yeah, it's a combo with the pants trigger. So, and the other card displayed is it's a searchable rest counter. You pay one and discard 3 cards when you use her ability, her backup ability, and then you can
Tap a
rest
character.
one of their characters.
Hmm.
So the Kotori is obviously a very powerful card. -2 soul. The only times I can think of that I've seen it used effectively, I'm using effectively very loosely here,
It was Y
is
form, right?
uh, Zviform, and like years ago, people trying to make the female Titan deck work from AOT.
Oh my god.
I mean, and like you
Yeah, that's
laugh or
fair. Yeah,
whatever,
no, I get it. That's fair.
but that was a
I think,
very promising thing for that deck because when it went off, it was kind
yeah,
of absurd, but the rest of the deck shell is just, it's an army deck, it's Titans. So
yeah. People also tried making. There's a Contai card that did this effect too.
yeah, but
At level 3.
yeah, but she couldn't be early played, so not the
Yeah,
same. But
yeah,
I believe it was Soryu.
yeah.
Yes, Soryu saw a bit of play in between sets 2 and 3 when Contai was kind of starting to fall off and people were innovating it more.
Hmm. Just a objectively super standout effect. I think, like,
Yeah,
people see -2 soul and their eyes get wide, and you look at it and it's an early play. It's probably one of the best, if not the best, implementations of the -2 soul effect we've seen, like, period. I think because unlike the other ones where they just gain the ability, usually they just gain the ability for a turn cycle. Um, this card is the player is in control of when they want to use the -2 soul. And I think that's actually really powerful because sometimes -2 soul isn't the best thing in the world.
hmm
Sometimes it gives your opponent more options as to, sometimes it doesn't even stop damage from coming in. So the ability to, choose when you want to use the -2 soul and use it when it's when most appropriate to use, I think it's just a really nutty addition to this really powerful effect.
yeah. Um, and also like just some things to consider with this, like it's a pants trigger, like we said, so that makes it a little easier to um, like loop. Early versions of decks that I remember playing had this 1/1 event that could search for a climax. It's similar to like glow sticks from Idolmaster, but it's blue instead of yellow. Um, there's a
Yeah.
like a check top 5 level 3 in the KKK deck. That's another way, or the triple K deck, excuse me. That's another way to find the climax. And then because of the nature of your absurd low cost to no cost mill engine, it's very easy to get your deck to refresh, and then you could early play these. You had a lot of control over when you had 2 or less climaxes in waiting room.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next deck was Gaia. Uh, a lot of people had high hopes for Gaia because that was the meta rewrite deck before. The old deck is the first deck, uh, the first deck to have like a runner Ricky pair.
Yeah. It
Uh,
was first deck to have a lot of things.
yeah,
Uh,
it did a lot of very good things for the time. It had anti heal. It had uh, it had decent healers for when it didn't need the anti heal. Uh, it had a cancel burn on a level 3, which was a very rare thing at that time. It had a good spammable brainstorm. It had a level 1 to level 2 change into a massive beater that was also your plussing combo.
mhm.
But two of the more standout cards, I guess, that people probably remember are the Riki and the Tutu Chihaya, uh, which are these cards. These are cards I remember from the deck from back then
Uh, PTSD for
for old
survivors
people.
of that format. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
But some of the standout cards for this deck going forward is they got an Akatsuki, an Azusa, ditch a card, look at top four, add an Akane, a Chihaya, or a Sakia to your hand.
Yeah,
They got this mill four event, or
it's
not
kind of like
exactly mill four. You would mill two, and then based on what you mill, you would mill two more, and then you would salvage a character, right?
yeah, based on the level of the cards you milled, I think.
Yeah,
Something like that.
similar to Operation Tornado from Angel Beats.
Yeah, if you're checking for level one or higher characters. Oh, cards.
Yeah.
Um,
So
this was cool because oh, you can go ahead.
so like the hype for the triple K cards, costless milling, obviously very powerful in Weiss. An idea that I'm sure many people had when these cards started being spoiled is these allow you to set up your 1/1 to 2/2 change faster or more consistently. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, which honestly, by the time this set came out, that was a very antiquated pair of cards. But I mean, I think it's fair to sort of look at the cards and look at the old shell and see what could possibly be incorporated together.
yeah. If
Because like that
you
deck was
could
just so
salvage any
good
part of it,
for a long time.
yeah.
And
People were really just hung up on saving that deck. Uh,
yeah,
whatever it took, really. This pair of cards is really cool because I mean you could just keep milling if you wanted to because you could mill more Akatsukis and then get them back with this event. And
yeah,
just a lot of milling for free.
yeah. Ends up theoretically playing out how the triple K deck would, the milling part of it at least.
Yeah,
Um, and then the final deck, which I assume a lot of viewers have at least heard about by now, is Guardian, uh, which is centered
mm,
around Shizuru, the blonde, and Lucia, the dark-haired girl. So, uh, Guardian in the past was it,
not
it
good.
it existed, but it was just like a very vanilla deck. All it really had was it had like beaters and it had a clock kicker.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
it's just kind of like one of those waifu decks for the most part.
yeah, the only remotely competitive deck in rewrite pretty much the whole time, like Harvest Festa on, was the Gaia deck. So this deck got a lot of good cards. Some initial standout cards. We have the level 3 Shizuru, which is a healer, and Onverse pay 3, ditch 1, burn 2, scry 1 on both turns. Scry 1 is a exceptional addition to the card, makes both your triggers better and allows you to play a bit more defensively,
Yeah,
either by burning on last attack or burning when your opponent crashes into you.
it's just such a weird. I think it was just a very strange addition. Like,
Like just as like tinfoil hat theory, I feel like maybe they didn't know how to properly cost
oh
the
yeah, and
burn
so they
two,
just added.
so they put
Yeah.
it at 3. They maybe thought that was a little much, so they added a tiny little extra
Oh yeah,
effect.
it's not good enough, guys.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that could be how they thought it. That would just be my assumption because Bushiroad obviously makes a lot of card design choices or stock choices based on how many affects
previous
the card.
budgeting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, so this 1/0 Shizuru, which is a 1/0 4K against 2K if you have 5 or more stock, and it has a climax combo with a stock soul to stock a character from the waiting room, a Lucia or a Shizuru character. from
Yeah.
the waiting room. So it's very similar to the Ellie from Milky Holmes, which at the time was a very good deck. Uh,
Hmm.
like Ellie, it comboed with a bar, but you'd get to these pretty decently high stock numbers, and you would turn that stock into pluses throughout the game. The way that this deck could turn its stock into pluses is this 0/0 Lucia. It's an Amagi effect, which means you pay one, look at up to four cards from the top of your deck, and uh, add whatever trait to your hand. In this case, it adds Shizuru or Lucia, and then it can tap to give 1k power. And then
Uh,
this 3/2 Lucia, which is an early play back row support. It early plays if you have experience 6, and it's a 1k level assist, so like 1k per level of the character in front of it. It has draw 2, ditch 2, stock 1 from top of deck on play, and it has a climax combo I don't quite remember, but results in minus 4k for your opponent's
it's
board or
like
something. It
Wing Slayer
very similar
or
to
like a
Winged Slayer
super.
from
Yeah.
Disgaea, but
Oh,
you have to like top check and ditch a card when you
yeah.
play the bar. It seems a
It's a
bit
pretty
stock
situational.
intensive.
Yeah. The hype was surrounding the other text on the card for
Yeah,
sure.
it being an early play, like very sizable assist that essentially only cost one stock because of its on play ability.
It was kind of like the missing piece for the Shizuru because I think a lot of people, when we saw the Shizuru, um, we were like, "Oh, this effect's pretty good, but it's only 10k. Like, is it going to reverse much?" And then this card got spoiled, and
Yeah,
everyone was like, "Whoa!"
and for people that
Hmm.
have played with or against Guardian, like you know that these two are amazing together, and the Shizuru is just such a beautiful and wonderful stock out for all the stock you make throughout the game with your 1/0
Yeah.
and friends, I guess.
Hmm.
Another another important part to the Guardian deck was this little suite, I guess. Not so much the last card, but
The first two certainly.
yeah.
Like,
The center card is a card called Gloves. It is a an event punch for 500 times the number of stock you have.
and you need a Lucha on board to play this at all.
Yes. The 0/0 the 0/0 on the left is it's a clock filter. So when you play it, you ditch a card, you add a Lucia or Shizuru from your clock to your hand if you paid the cost. And then it is also a clock bond for the gloves event. The gloves event obviously um, should stand out as a pretty good card in a stock charge deck. Uh, it's how this deck is able to compare its numbers to Milky Holmes's on defense.
Yeah, a lot of comparisons, I think, to Milky Holmes. Just people were like, "Wow, I've seen these cards before," or like,
Yeah,
and but I don't even think like people were hyping up the gloves. The clock bond may have ended up being just like the best card, like one of the best cards in the
yeah.
deck by far. I think.
For those who have not had the opportunity to play with or against this deck, uh, or for those who haven't really recognized this combo before, you could discard gloves for the first ability to clock cycle and then clock bond it back immediately. And then you can just keep doing that for every copy of this card you have, and you only need the one pair of gloves. You'll clock yourself a bunch, you'll still have a full hand, and you'll be attacking like 3 times super early. And sometimes you're even lucky enough to uh, take another copy of this Lucia's damage, so you don't even need to have other copies of this in your hand already. Sometimes it just feeds itself super easily.
Yeah, and the best part, it's all free,
Yeah,
so you can just do this from any position. Um, going second, turn one, you could you do this like it happens.
yeah,
That's just one of the really powerful parts about this deck. Um,
yeah. The deck can even go as far as to I've definitely played against people who use their Ricky searches to get this card
yeah,
and just do stuff like that. So I think using your Ricky on something like this and not even your 1-0 combo, that could be a testament to how powerful this card is. And also, just to quickly touch on it, this third card, it's a clock bomb, and you can discard the gloves from hand to give a front row character minus 4K.
Yeah. Um,
Is it only against solo characters, or is it against like?
no, you can choose anything in the front row. When you play the card, you use the effect, and you just choose a card in the opponent's front row, and it gets my neg 4K.
Yeah.
Um,
This is not as standout as the other cards, but like minus 4K is kind of interesting. Like first thought I'm sure people have is like it's comparable to anti-runner cards.
you know,
Uh, so maybe there's some potential there. And then final standout card for Guardian, this 2/1 Lucia gains 1k power for each other Shizu or Lucia you control. That alone blew my mind when this card came out. Just it
oh
being
yeah.
like a 2/1 10k, that was like so
Was this
weird
like
to
the
me.
first? This is one of the first rounds of this kind of 1K per
Uh,
like
I
name
know
or
that
trait.
the Beatrice from
Oh
ReZero
right,
does
yeah,
it,
the Beatrice was the yeah, okay.
but these sets came out a week apart, so
Yeah, yeah.
those cards are probably designed very like close to each other.
Hmm.
Um, so gets 1k for every other. Neither player can use character backup in battles involving this. And when you play a climax, it gains a blind stock on reverse.
Yeah. Um, so you can early play 3/2 assist, and you have this card. This card is actually not spoiled. I think this card was discovered after the list was released. Um, Initially, I believe people wanted to use the 2/1 Quasar from Harvest Festa, which just markers on reverse. But then, like, people just found out about this card, and like the text is just really unfair, especially for a deck that just uses event backups
Yeah,
to defend its characters. Uh,
but
like you,
even then, like if you have this in front of a 3/2 Lucia and your full board is Shizuru Lucia,
yeah, it's
it'll be
12K.
12k, which is
Mm,
pretty crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, so
And
this was definitely an all-star when it was discovered, but I don't remember a lot of people talking about it in like the first week or so.
yeah, it took a yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely the hype was on other cards for sure.
Yeah. So as with last time, we have some early lists from Twitter. This one is of a Guardian deck.
Yeah.
You're the one that pulled the list, so why did you pull this one specifically?
Um, well, it was just one of the first things, and I think a lot of times with the Japanese, we pointed this out um, in the Persona video. Their method for like deck building usually involves a lot of experimentation with a bunch of different cards, and this time it's no different. Um, they're just going around trying different things. You see some one-ofs here, like the 3/1 heal event, 2/1 Quasar, 2/1 memory kick counter, and they're running like an interesting climax spread. They're trying to go for this really greedy
Yeah.
approach, incorporating the Kotori, incorporating the gold bar combo. Um, but there's some stuff here that I think eventually became just a part of Guardian lists, as experimental as it might be, like in other aspects. Like, uh, I think it's just a nice foundation for looking at Guardian lists, and then, as a compare and contrast. I think the standout cards for the Japanese list, apart from the obvious Guardian core, I think Japan really likes the 3/2 Kotori and the Pants combo, and they also happen to like the Chihaya Brainstorm. They were some of the first players running that card in this Guardian shell, and another card they also like to run is this 1/0 Shizuru that has the clean cut Yukiko effect.
Hmm.
That's also one of the hallmarks of their Guardian builds.
Yeah, and it also gains power on attack or
Yeah,
something, right?
yeah. The intent is obviously to just take advantage of gloves and save characters that have already been just introduced another element of interaction with your opponent, making having this on the board just influences the way your opponent has to approach attacking your board. And of course, you can also use it on offense to
Hmm.
save things. Like sometimes in Guardian, you have to play some pretty low powered cards occasionally. Using this card to save one of those cards just saves you from taking more damage in the long run. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, interesting. And then to go with that, we have like your early build of
Yeah.
Guardian, which was
This was,
like a more Western, like what
yeah.
at least how the people we talk with, how we thought the deck was going to be built. Um,
Um, pretty, not as high on the Katori. I don't think that actually ever occurred to me because I was so focused on making Katori work in Triple K that I was just like, we don't need to do that in this deck. Um,
yeah, an interesting
it's
standout
just as
right
greedy
away
though, I think.
though. This yellow event.
Yes.
What does it do?
It's a 4 stock event. You have to ditch 2 when you use it. It's a counter. It just gives -2 soul to everything on your opponent's board. Uh, Much like Japan, Western players are greedy as well. Whereas they were greedy trying to, fit all that stuff with the Katorian, I was being greedy with this event. And I rationalized it such that, oh, it's experience. You need experience 6. It's a level 3 card. You can stick in the level zone, and like this effect is pretty sweet. -2 soul. Um, this was actually another part of the reason why I didn't think of putting the Katori into Guardian, mainly because I thought, this event is just better, right? It's can't really play around it as easily, like maybe as easily as you could. The Katori um, might be more of a hoser in certain scenarios. Um, yeah, I just included it because I thought it'd be a really sweet effect with the way the deck wanted to play,
Hmm.
which was, you know, probably just a grindier game, burning over turns.
Yeah,
The event helps you survive.
yeah. And then another card I'd like to point out is the 1/0 Lucia.
Oh yeah,
The that's a Taige, right?
yeah, it's a tie game. I mean, I think the West and the Japanese went. They fell into similar. They felt a similar need for filler beaters. I just went with the Lucha. This Lucha, they went with the 1/0 Blue Shizuru. In the end, a lot of early lists ran maybe more filler beaters than they probably needed to. And at a certain point, you just start to see this kind of card getting cut lower and lower
Yeah.
in these decks, mainly because it's just not that necessary.
Y-
Um,
Yeah, and some other things I noticed between these two lists is not for Bonder, not for gloves.
yes, I think at this point, I hadn't realized. Like, I don't know if anyone had really realized um, how good the card was. It was a little innocuous, actually. I think originally I was thinking, oh, it's just a clock filter, right? And I need discard outlets. It's a cool card. Like, I won't ever use it that much, but uh, I think those are my thoughts.
Hmm.
I included higher counts because when I test, I like to include inflated count, like more inflated counts of maybe what I'd usually run, and tune it later. Um, yeah, I
Yeah.
3-3.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see how like Guardian develops, but it might be worth touching on some early Gaia and Triple K lists.
Yeah.
So this is a
What is? Would you like to
I mean I
characterize
so
this list
so
for the class?
as a I'm trying not to laugh. That's it's really rude. I'm not
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
be rude.
yeah.
So this is like an early Gaia list, which is borrowing pieces from the Triple K deck as well, but not so heavily. Just like the
The
Kagari level
standout
3,
cards and the
the
Kotori.
the Kotori healer, and yeah, those are like the top end related cards, I guess. This also has the Shizuru 1-0 that
Yeah.
was in that first deck we looked at, which is an interesting card actually because he's playing the Chihaya bombs. Um, so
Yeah.
so running like a saver like that with bombs can force your opponent to make unfavorable front attacks on their next turn, or maybe not even front attack at all.
Hmm.
Um, but as you can see, this is a player who recognized that the 1-1 to 2-2 change was probably not as strong as it was however many years ago,
Yeah.
and decided to experiment a bit more with his cards. He's playing cards that don't go with don't go with like the pre prescribed Bushiroad list, and he's I'm having trouble saying stuff because I know how a number of these cards perform in all actuality, but I have
He's just
seen.
experimenting.
Yeah,
Like a lot. I mean, we saw lists like when we were looking at the Persona 5 lists. A lot of lists were, akin to just, throwing something at the wall and seeing if it sticks.
yeah, that's true. And I think one of the bigger takeaways of this is not necessarily related to Guardian, but it's or sorry, not Guardian, Gaia, but it's how much Japan really wanted to use this Kotori.
Yeah, I think that is probably the most out of place card in this entire list.
Yeah, because normally the like the Kagari, while not being the correct name, Gaia is still a red yellow deck. It's easier to splash for, but by
Yeah,
going with this Kotori, he's having to play these blue cards that he normally wouldn't be playing. And not that these blue cards are bad or anything, but it definitely warps his deck more because of it.
yeah, because you're playing not just for color, but also because of the climax combo. You need blue characters
Yeah,
in your waiting room when you play the combo. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. So, um, yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting. So it's not like pure Gaia, but it's definitely like has a lot of the backbone pieces, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and then we have an early triple K list, which
This is very close to being maxed.
yeah, and
Like,
you said that this list was posted like a day after release.
yeah, this
Yeah.
guy is a high roller.
It's just quickly on that. It seems weird that the card he's missing is the Kagari
Oh yeah.
and not like an SP. Uh,
Um, I, I mean, this is just like a super. I mean, I think the deck itself wasn't going to be that difficult to build because a lot of your slots were basically pre-filled for you.
yeah. Definitely. Like he's going a little lighter on the Bond engine than I
Yes,
think a lot of us were.
I think the Japanese in general, um, like we saw this with when we did the Persona 5 stuff. They don't necessarily see these mill effects as being universally good all the time. I think they just see it as a way to um, accelerate to their next deck. For like get out of that first deck because it's really bad. We don't want any part of it. And then an occasional emergency mill here and there, but not their main way of getting cards. Hence, less slots devoted to it, much
Yeah.
less.
Uh, but while it has less slots devoted to it, he is playing for this Kagari that mills too,
Oh yeah.
which is something we also saw with Persona, like people playing the mill two Joker or the and bomb.
And this
Um,
mill 2 had like an additional really funny sack factor.
yeah, you could sack into your 1-0 combo sometimes, which is kind of cool. Feels good. I've done it.
Yeah.
And then I guess a standout thing here, but as to probably nobody's surprise at this point, because this is like a month after Gochi Yusu came out. He's playing these like beaters that's very similar to the Kokoa from Gochi
Oh
Yusa
yeah.
instead of
It gets
runners.
gets +1 level, +1 power, +1K power, two or less cards in stock.
Yeah, and that this is around the time when a lot of people were switching over to beaters
Hmm.
from runners in the Japanese meta, at least.
Yeah,
Uh,
and no runners here. Like, yeah,
yeah,
because the
yeah,
Kagari beater is taking those slots.
yeah.
Um,
So those are some like really early decks.
yeah, and
Like
there's still like
I guess we have
oh yeah, here's another one. Uh,
whoops.
well,
So another like sort of side engine thing they had in the set was this thing called Power Spot. Uh,
it's actually a really sweet engine.
yeah,
It's like a pretty, it's like a self-recurring plus stock light.
yeah. The way it works is
Like
the
yeah,
so the event on play is it on play you stock something from waiting room?
uh, yeah, that's part of the effect.
Yeah,
You do the top check first, and then you do the stock.
mm. Yeah, but if the you top check and if it's a
Level one
triple
or higher.
K, oh, is it level one or higher? Wow,
Yeah, level one or higher.
shows what I know. So if it's level one or higher, you add that card to hand, right?
Yeah.
And then you can stock a triple K character from waiting room.
Yes. And there's a bond to this card
Yeah, that's also
that
a scry, so you get to look
yeah.
at top, live on top, or put on bottom. So while definitely not as talked about as the other stuff, this was seen as a very interesting engine because the high point of it is it's pay 0 plus 1,
Yep.
and it might even be like a stock positive. Well, I guess when it's stock positive, it's not a plus because you didn't bond
Yeah,
for it.
because you didn't bond for it. But
But
like
it's
it's still
still
like a
it's interesting. It's like
pretty
it's
yeah.
just like +1 stock sometimes.
Hmm. And
Uh,
it was also using the army cards, and I think the army cards themselves, um, it's really just about compression. I
mhm,
think the entire point of the cards is generally like fat dudes with markers underneath that are clean.
yeah,
Um, and of course, you know, this is still running 3-2 Katori. Um, the power spot engine allows it to be self-sufficient level one, so the deck is also going for like a greedier end game by running both Katori. So it's basically going to try and go Katori into the Chihaya finisher
mhm,
um, on the back of this power spot engine.
yeah. And then the tree guys, like you marker the 0 zeros from waiting room,
Hmm.
and then it makes your power spots in your subsequent decks better.
Yes.
Like that's another part of the
Hmm.
idea.
And you can feasibly just keep cycling the event
Yeah.
whenever, and it's free. So.
Yeah, so it was a interesting idea. There was a concept there. I know someone personally who has like a little power spot engine in his triple K deck, but
Hmm.
uh, definitely a less explored part of the rewrite set when it came out and even to today.
Yeah, I mean, and this just, I mean, all these lists, um, there was no consensus deck at this point. I think it took a little bit. A lot of people were trying different things.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely remember a big thing. The big thing was like triple K or Guardian. Uh, and
Yes.
triple K seemed a bit more favorable because people didn't really find out all the tricks with Guardian,
Yep.
all the like little in betweens that made it the deck that people know it as today.
Yeah. And people were just more hyped about the triple K cards in general.
Yeah, and the deck was just easier to build, I think.
Yeah.
So it was easier to find a list that was closer to solved or 100% than it was for Guardian.
Hmm.
Anyway, so flash forward a bit of time. Do you remember when this list was from?
I think it was April. Like, and this would be like a few, 3-4 months after
Hmm.
the set dropped. And at this point, we can already see the list has become far more streamlined. Um,
Yeah, versus the Japanese list we looked at with a bunch of one and two ofs.
mhm.
This has like clearer ideas of what it wants to do. I think it's on four gloves, it's on three bonders, it's on like four Amagi and four Chihaya.
Yeah, and obviously, the level threes, 4 Kotori, 3 Shizu, 3 Lucha.
Yeah, it's on
Um,
three of the 2-1.
mhm,
It's not playing filler beaters anymore.
yep. It's actually running like a card we didn't see before, which was well, we saw the card actually. Um, the Check Top 2 promo, as well
Yeah,
as like they're running like a Ricky this time.
yeah, but
I think
it's
that's a level 2 or higher Ricky
the
salvage.
I don't think it's
No,
level
level
2 or
1 or
higher.
lower. It's level
Yeah,
1 or lower. Sorry. Um, and the addition of this PR,
the
the Shizuru PR.
yeah, it's a on play mill 3, 2500 power character.
Yeah.
Going back to the idea that they want to rush through their first deck as much as they can,
Hmm.
and this was probably the most efficient way to do it and still be the correct trait or name rather
Yeah.
for the rest of the deck.
And I think there's also something to be said for like really fast mill enabling gloves better. You
Yeah,
know, if you have the bond, milling more, you're likely to get the gloves in waiting room. So, um,
yeah, it
you
it,
know,
inc-
it's
it increases the number of games like over a large like sample size
yeah,
that you'll be able to bond when you normally wouldn't have.
yeah. And a thing I think a lot of Western players found out about Guardian, and I'm sure Japanese players found it out too. Um, the deck can sometimes struggle clearing that first hurdle, which is the first, like the awful first deck, mainly because it's outside of the Chiaya and Amagi are both stock. They both cost a stock. The Shizu is just a nice way, get some milling, extra milling level 0, and that push usually will push you, to a good enough deck state where you don't feel like uncomfortable with the amount of cards left in your first deck,
Yeah,
which is why they run the card.
yeah. And do you remember? I don't have like a comparative like Western list for this time frame, but do you remember around what time people started playing the Chiaya Brainstorm in the
I think
West?
it was a bit after this list came out. Um,
Yeah, because
initially,
I remember there's like a
I know people were
an opposition to it.
yeah, I know people were playing Japanese lists. Uh, and um, I think initially there was some resistance to the idea of playing this card because oh, Japanese players. But
Well, I think the
it
idea
took a
was more
while.
like if you're going off, you have a Magi. Why do you need a
Right, yeah,
Brainstorm or something like that? But as it
yeah,
turns out, the Chihaya Brainstorm was just very good in your subsequent decks after you
yeah.
just get your
If you
deck to a much better ratio through it being your second deck and the
and you have the
stock
stock,
charge combo.
yeah, you have the stock to spare, obviously.
And then just
I think the other,
as a really basic idea, if you hit your Brainstorm, you probably hit like you hit one or two, you're in a good position. You don't hit your
I think the
Brainstorm,
other,
you cancel.
yeah, yeah. I
That's
think
like
the other
very base idea.
source of opposition to the Chai was that it made the 2-1 weaker, the 2-1 Lucha, the trash bag, and I think a lot of Western players much more value. Like it's not as much of a factor in these Japanese lists because they really want to play 3-2 Kotori level 2. But the Western lists, I think, were much more favoring using the 2-1 Lucha as the main game plan.
Hmm.
And obviously, if you have the Chiaya Brainstorm on board, it makes it 1k power smaller, which is actually a fairly significant like dip in power at level 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to use the 2-1 to combat early plays generally.
And like 11k, 12k is like where the sweet spot was, still is for a lot of early plays. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, so then this is a fairly recent one you found, right?
yeah, I think this is the most. Yeah, this was maybe like last month, a few weeks ago, maybe even. Um,
Yeah.
not that much to say. Like,
Yeah. Not a lot
it's a
is
similar.
super different.
Yeah, it's a similar deck composition. They're still running the Mill 3 Shizuru. They're still running Kotori. They're still running Chiai Brainstorm. All the pieces are there. Gloves is now maxed at 4 copies of each piece. Um, they're running some top checkers. Um, they're running the 1-0 Shizuru makes a reappearance. I mean, for the most part, I think Guardian lists have basically, the list for each region has been pretty much solved for the most part. There
Yeah.
are some slight differences in the way people will, uh, make up ratios for the decks, but
I
for the most
mean,
part, they're all running, you know, similar pieces
yeah, there's
at this
always
point.
going to be flex slots, but at this point, we have a very clear like four Katori, 3 to 4 Shizuru,
Hmm.
like four Brainstorm, four Bonder, four Gloves. Like there are just parts of the deck that do not move.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then as contrast, we have the list you've been running,
Yeah,
correct?
my most recent list. Yep. Um, and I'm
So
it's
first thing compared to like the last four lists we've looked at, you play one Katori and no pants. Do you care
yes.
to talk about that?
Yeah. So in testing, what came up a lot was I'd have to level Shizuru, the Shizuru healer, for experience and for color, and that generally was just not a desirable thing to do. Um, so the Katori is in here as a concession to the reality of Experience 6, essentially acting as like a fifth copy of the Shizuru that can go into the level zone. And, sometimes one in like 50 games, it'll be an early play heal. Um,
Yeah.
but essentially, it's just a role player to support the 3-2 Shizuru, which I think is the biggest difference between some of the Western lists and the Japanese approach. They see the deck as making stock to go to this really good mid game with Katori, that can maybe shut out a game just right then there at level 2, whereas the Western approach has been to let's just play triple lake. Let's play 2 to 3 Shizu level 3 and get all the burns, and we're just going to finish the opponent that way.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Something else about Western lists is Ricky, right?
yeah, we run Ricky, like the Akane, the original Akane Ricky. Uh, um,
Yeah. Do you have any input on that, or
I,
not?
I
Maybe
I
not input,
actually,
but speculation as to why they choose
um,
not to run it.
I think, well, they do like, I think at this point they might just really like the clock bond.
Mm.
I think they might just see the clock bond as their main way to get caught, like this clock based plus that a lot of decks really want. And they run some copies of the salvage Ricky, maybe in concession to the fact they're going to be milling a lot because they play the mill 3 Shizuru. So um, I don't know if they're also, I don't even know if they're necessarily looking to play too many copies of the 1-0 Shizuru combo, even. Um, I think really they're just really all in on that bond, that gloves bond,
Mm.
and they see it as like a really good way to get the pluses they need to sustain their hand until level 2.
Yeah.
That and the brainstorm. Um,
And then just as a theoretical, I guess, would you say that this side by side thing of how Western and Japanese lists have evolved, that Western players would rather um, kind of like gather all their stock and wait till level 3 and sort of play this game with Chizuru, and that like the Japanese, they clearly value Kotori, so are they looking to get maybe less stock over a game, but spend it more immediately and cash in on
mhm.
-2 souls with the 3K to front from the
I think,
Lucio?
yeah, I think so. I think in general, um, they really like efficient plays that take in mind the amount of damage that's being exchanged across turns. I think a uh, you know, big representative of this trend in their play is like their preference for early play healers. Um, they play early play healers. Like we play early plays. partially to get an advantage in damage, right? They're two soul beaters. They usually live, which creates like this imbalance in that slot over turns between you and your opponent. You're doing more damage. And early plays, heal, which kind of tilt that more in your favor. And then Katori is just the ultimate one of the ultimate realization of that concept. She's an early play healer, checkbox one that also does this -2 soul effect, which is from their perspective, it's just like super good. Like, why wouldn't you want to run this card?
Right.
Yeah, like it creates such an imbalance as far as damage for both players if she's just there. Whoever resolves her first. I think they just see that as a really good way to win a lot of games. Like they see it as a more secure way to, go into mid game. I don't think they're looking to finish their opponents from like 3-0 or anything. I think they're looking to get a damage lead, and they comfortably float into level 3 and their opponents like already like hit like 2 like level 3 damage, like 3-3 or 3-4 or something, and then all they have to do is like play like 1 or 2 Shizu, maybe not even 2, maybe just 1 Shizu, and like the game's over by that point.
Right.
I think they see it like that.
Yeah. So I guess with that idea is kind of wow, this image is reversed. I'm amazing. Whoops. Anyway, that doesn't take away from this discussion. It's bar versus pants.
Right.
Like, what do the two provide for the deck? Because obviously, all the lists trying to use Katori, or all the lists playing Katori are playing the pants to get like their full value out of Katori. They're playing for Katori. They're obviously going to play Katori and try to do this Katori minus soul game plan and swing the game in their favor, like you said. But the bar sort of reflects the Western idea of it, where like you're playing a more aggressive game, and well, maybe not even a more Western idea, because there's plenty of people that play pants, right?
Yeah, in the West.
Like
yeah.
this is a split within the West, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people see it both, like they just think the Katori is really good, and then rightly so. It's a really powerful effect.
Yeah, but then the bar is kind of facilitates more a 2-1 Lucia game plan, right? Because it's a climax that goes to your hand safely, as in there's a low chance that you'll stock another climax when you trigger this, and then it allows, so that's another way to get climaxes for your 2-1 Katori to reverse and gain you even.
Lucia.
Yeah, sorry. Wow, my mistake. 2-1 Lucia to get you even more stock for your explosive game plan, where you plan to Shizuru a few times.
Yeah. Another way to push damage too, in a way that doesn't really sacrifice your current deck impression. So like when you pants, right? If you ever trigger pants, if you take that plus, there's kind of a time crunch wherein you really want to get rid of that climax in your hand before, because you also there's like you want to pay out that stock first of all, and you also want to get rid of that climax that you just salvaged. Whereas with bar, it's just the climax enters your hand, and not so much of a chance to get the climax in your stock.
Yeah. So with that, where do you think Rewrite is in the meta?
I think Guardian is one of the strongest contenders right now in meta. I don't even think it's really just a question. I think in both regions, no matter what the build you're running, Guardian is a strong contender for like to win. I think if you want to win, this deck is one of the decks. Rewrite Guardian specifically is one of the decks that you would take a really long look at. And like if you're not playing this deck, you really need to know how to play against it.
Yeah. And even the difference between the two regions builds, like a lot of the strength in the deck um, comes from like the similar cards, right? Like
Right.
so, how would you pick between? I know obviously you've picked like Bar with less of a focus on Kotori, but what
Mm.
kind of thought process would you use to pick which version you wanted to play?
Yeah. So the Kotori build is really better suited to a meta where players are trying to be more conservative, I think, at level two. Um, they're looking a lot less towards, pushing a lot of damage with climax plays and more, they're trying to take it a little bit slower. They think of level two, if the players think of level two as this thing where both players, spend a couple turns there, Kotori suddenly becomes this really amazing value proposition wherein she can, if players are playing for 2 turns level two, Kotori can get you 3 turns, even 4 turns maybe at level two, and that's just like a really really strong effect. That's a really really strong advantage you get over other decks because right now, like Kotori is it. Like it's the premier -2 soul card in the game in the meta right now. Zwei form isn't even in consideration at this point, I think. And that would be how, like, if you feel like the players in your meta play for that more conservative level two, they don't run too many, like, then obviously they're not prepared for Kotori either. Like if they're not running too many cards or decks that can deal with Kotori very easily, um, by all means, like Kotori is a very strong card, and it's definitely like a meta consideration. When you play this card, you force people to respond to it, and if they can't respond to it, then they probably lost.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the
As
answer. Oh, sorry.
sorry, you're gonna
I mean, did you have anything else to say about that?
not no, not really.
Okay. And then
For the
some.
2-1.
No, no, no. I was gonna ask something completely different. So
Oh well,
if you're not.
sorry. I want to continue on the 2-1.
Oh yeah,
Sorry,
sure.
why you choose the
Of
2-1.
course.
And then like if you really and so obviously the 2-1 game plan going for the bars. If you really feel like a strength of Guardian is Shizuru and winning by amassing a critical mass of stock to win with Shizuru, just with a ton of burn twos. And a strength of Guardian is also the fact that the 2-1 Lucha is just basically impervious in a meta, suited towards playing around early plays. If that sounds ideal to you, if you have to have that kind of advantage, um, if you're worried about Kotori being susceptible to players who um, really just want to kill early plays and deal with them very effectively, um, yeah, 2-1 Lucha, that game plan is probably better. Um, and it, I don't, and it is, I don't think, noticeably less effective in the Kotori game plan. Mainly because there's such a difference in the amount of resources that you amass when you're playing the 2-1 Lucha build, as opposed to a Kotori focused game plan.
Right. Uh, and then it might be obvious what our thoughts are on this based on the last, I don't know, 40 minutes of this maybe. But where do you think KKK or Triple K and Gaia like land after all of this? Like, are they even a consideration? Is it even something worth like looking into
Mm,
for at least a competitively minded player?
I don't think so, and part of the reason is just um, the strengths of Gaia and Triple K. Um, I, this is gonna sound really bad, but I actually don't even know what unique strengths Gaia may or may not have. It's just that bad. Like to me, it's just that bad. Um, but for Triple K, this Fekoff engine, I think it just turns out that like milling for the sake of milling, this idea of an engine completely and utterly devoted to uh, this Azusa type effect, this Akatsuki type effect, sorry, where you're milling for, bonding to mill fours, bonding to cards that get you more mill fours. It ended up just not being enough to really support the rest of the deck in a way that was powerful. So that deck initially, like draft, that deck runs the 3/2 Kotori, but sadly enough, it's not good enough to support that card. As it's not as good as the Guardian Shell is at supporting that card. Uh,
Right.
yeah, you don't generate enough stock to play multiples of that card very easily in Triple K. Um, you don't have like a very oppressive top end card to go along with it to to get that final push you need. You really just have milling, and as it turns out, apart from the first deck and apart from emergency super fringe emergency situations, past the first deck, milling like this that milling such that it takes up 12 slots or like eight, even like 10 slots from your deck, um, really just isn't that strong.
Right. Like your milling should provide some sort of purpose.
Right.
And generally, the purpose, in a lot of cases, is it will get you through your first deck, which is
Hmm.
like a good goal, but then that's a lot of deck slots devoted to something that you don't necessarily want to use as much in subsequent refreshes.
Yeah, and if you're milling less, it makes the selection just like so much poorer, and it's already just not that great to begin with. At a certain point in Triple K, you just would rather brainstorm, honestly. Um, if you're in a more compressed state, if you're more likely to hit climax on your brains, I think you just rather brainstorm instead of going through this, carousel of cards with the Fekoff engine just to mill. I think you'd rather just get the cards you think you need for the situation. Um, and unfortunately, like the other thing about the Fekoff engine is the cards themselves aren't necessarily really great plays outside of like after level 0, after level 1. Um, they don't really win the board against too much. You are making sacrifices, significant sacrifices, committing slots to these cards on your field, and they need to be on your field because you can't use the bond effects without playing them. And I think that's also just another weakness maybe of the bond effect in general. You're committing just bad cards to the board just to you know get a card that may or may not you know be super strong,
Right.
like for the game state where you are. So um, mm,
Yeah.
that's how I feel about Triple K.
So, so as a summary, then, uh, Gaia, uh, a confused mess. Uh, Triple K did not live up to everyone's expectations, simply because of how stuff ends up working out in practice versus in theory.
Oh yeah, and the
Uh,
top end for Triple K is just like horrendous.
yeah, yeah, of course.
It's just not very good. Um, you have a Misakuro, like the Kagari, that's like a Misakuro type effect, and that's about it. Like,
Yeah,
and you have tap counter. Like, these are not top tier options, really. I mean, these aren't competitive options. Like, you don't want to choose a deck and say to yourself, "Well, I guess my top end is just bad." Like, that's not something you want to feel about your deck. That's not something you want to say about your deck that you're taking to a tournament. I think, and that's where Guardian just really shines. With Because Shizur's potentially just one of the best healers ever printed, as far as like a
right.
healer finisher type. Um,
Yeah. So anyway, as I was saying, um, Gaia kind of confused, kind of didn't get very much that needed. Like even though we didn't show that many lists, if you look at a lot of lists, um, they're either trying to incorporate cards from other things or they're just like there's just not that many lists out there.
yeah, I think
Like
a
people
lot of
would people rather play Guardian or KKK from the beginning, and even or Triple K from the beginning, and even now it's just basically weaned down to people playing Guardian.
Yep. And just
So
making small changes, trying to streamline the deck even more. Like as a competitive choice, I think both decks have just gotten phased out.
yeah,
Um,
and that's just the truth, or the sad truth sometimes with these Weiss sets, because you're also just not going to have high representation unless from multiple builds within a series, unless those builds are like super close, right?
yeah,
Or at least
and
you shouldn't be seeing it.
mhm. And usually I think if you have super close, like I think how it usually works out is if you have builds in a set that are just like really close, chances are typically that they're not entirely too powerful. Just like
Right. You would rather have
if there's
your
if there's not a
deck
clear
be
answer,
yeah.
right? That just means that these cards, like the cards, aren't good enough. Like if the build isn't solved or it's not streamlined, you're just looking at a confused mess of cards. I think most of the time,
Yeah. Well, hopefully
with some
someone
exceptions.
sure, but that's not
Yeah,
the case here, right?
yeah, of course.
Like Guardian is just clearly better.
Mm-hmm.
Representation shows that. Just playing with the cards shows that.
Yeah.
And Guardian is a deck because of its nature. I think will be good for a very long time.
Uh, and we could just talk a little bit about that,
Yeah, like
maybe. Um, I think no matter what build of Guardian you're running, whether it's Kotori or 2-1 Kotori, I mean Kotori or 2-1
two and Lucia.
Lucius, my goodness. Um, the deck is strong at every single level besides level one. And even at level one, the level one is just I think a lot of players have come to this realization that level one is really just kind of like a small stepping stone
Yeah,
to level two, which is where game is usually decided. Um, and this is mainly because it's either interactive to the point of completely shutting out your opponent, as is the case with Kotori, or it's just incredibly non-interactive to the point of just not caring what your opponent does, which is what it does at level zero. It gets pluses no matter what your opponent does. Um, at level two, it either shuts out your opponent with incredible damage economy, like it with the -2 soul, or with cards that'll just live against the entirety of the field, which is the 2-1 Lucha build. And level three, it all leads the same thing, which is the 3-2 Shizuru. Um, there is almost no way to play around that card, and I think it puts a premium. That card is so strong that I think it puts a premium on meta answers to that card. So things that bounce it, things that card decks that can side it, um, anti burn, even like in the sense like maybe some Star Wars cards have like anti burn in the lane or something. Um, it's a card that has to be accounted for, and I think that's the case for Guardian at every single level. It's a threat to every single deck in the field, and I think it's kind of like it feels like a very superlative way to go about describing a deck. All these, it's the best of everything. There's nothing it does wrong, but it might just really be the case for this deck. It's just um so good at attacking this current meta, where decks are looking to get value at level zero with cheap pluses. Guardian does that way better than everyone else. It um, Decks are looking to get this leg up at level two. Guardian has best in class tools for all of that, no matter what build you choose. And of course, decks need finishers, good finishers that are well supported by the rest of the deck. And Guardian also has that, one of the best in the game. So, like, uh, unless the meta really changes in a wacky way that I can't think of in a moment, it is hard to see Guardian just getting a lot worse, unless other decks just catch up, which could be the case. Like we might see that, but as of right now, I don't see it. Um, I think Hardy is just super good contender.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for tuning into episode 2 of Brunch Before Weiss Schwarz. Still looking for any feedback that you guys have, and not really sure on a release schedule quite yet, but hopefully these will be like a month apart at most. So I hope you guys are looking forward to the next one. This is Butts and Coconuts and Tim Tom signing off.
Mm. See you.